Welcome to the KH260 day 1. Let's look at how to use the knitting machine all the way up to basic operation. Okay, welcome to day 1. So we're going to go through the instruction manual for the KH260. I only have a printed one, I do not have an actual one. As you can see, when I printed this off, I printed it off wrong, so every second page is upside down, which is fine. We will make it work. I've already set up the machine in several videos, so I guess we can go through how I set it up. We can try and go through the parts names, and then we will go through the before starting to knit with the needle position, row counter, tension dial, cast on comb, cam buttons, change knob. We're going to go through the basic operation, and then we're going to go right into pattern knitting. We're going to discuss the punch card, the basic steps, what's special about tuck, two-color tuck, skip stitch, two-color skip stitch, weaving patterns, weaving motif patterns, ferrule patterns, double length patterns, ferrule motif patterns, thread lace patterns, thread lace motif patterns, plating the yarn knitting, including tuck, and then we're going to discuss the sponge bar and replacing needles. I already did a video on the knit leader, so I'm not going back into the knit leader. We will be going into making a garment. I have a child next door who needs a sweater, but I also have a member of my channel who would like to see how to do a neckline with a punch card. So we are definitely going to do a adult size sweater using a punch card. I'm just waiting to hear which knitting method, if it's ferrule or if she's doing tuck or slip. Important for the neckline is carriage should jam. Like, all these useful hints will actually help you knit garments, because you will need to restart your carriage when doing things like necklines. You can see here what each punch card does, their numbers. Sure, some of these photos are really horrible. I must say that punch card 6P is one of my favorites. I'm not going to deny that one. I've used it in several different projects. I have never used a lot of these just because I just haven't had a chance. I'm actually looking forward to a few thread lace. Oh, and now we're into how to use the knitting machine. Okay, so I always call this a grasshopper because it's got the antenna and the little mouth parts. Mine looks a little bit different than yours because I am on a motor mount. That is my go-to table for knitting machines. So we have our tension discs. We have to make sure that our yarn goes between the tension discs and goes behind the little tooth. We then bring down our antenna after we go through the mouth parts. Then the antenna keeps the tension on our yarn, so that when we go back and forth, the slack is picked up so we don't get looping. You will find during these videos that I will have a lot of looping, only because my yarn is going to get caught on my camera mount and various other things that I have in the way of proper knitting. But we have to give for that. You will also know that I have my ribber already attached. There is no sense leaving it off and off to the side. There is nothing I can demonstrate where the ribber is going to be in the way. We don't do lace. Well, we can do lace. I might add lace to this series, but it'll be a complimentary one. When I set up the 260, everybody noticed that my carriage was not in the case. The reason why my carriage is not in the case is because I have the bracket for the motor mount always on my carriage. So it will not actually fit back in the case. So it stays out. It's been voted off the island. I always put up my row counter even though I use DAC for a lot of my work, because sometimes DAC fails and you always want to back up. Your row counter will not fail. There is no way. Let's talk about our carriage. I tend to get cotton mouth, and my words don't come to me easily. So I will say the wrong words for these poor things. I sometimes call the sinker plate a connecting arm, even though it's not connected to anything. This is the sinker plate. Yarn feeders, you have A and B. You have sinker plate knobs. I will never mention those. It says here cam buttons. So these are your cam buttons. When I set up my machine, I make sure to check that all of my buttons are going in and out properly, and that I can turn them off. If I'm in KC and I have a button, that needs to be able to turn it off. If when you go from KC into N and these buttons do not disengage, give them a wiggle, try again, and what's going on is that inside the cover of the carriage, you have some old grease that needs to be rehydrated. I suggest taking these things apart and putting proper lithium grease onto those parts that you do not see that need to move. That way you don't have to do it every 2 months. You can do it once a year. I hope that makes sense. We need to talk about the holding cam lever. You have N for normal knitting, H is for hold. We have a tripper back here. This trips the knit leader. This one trips the row counter. Huh. It actually says, which I did not know, the tripper on the right is for operating the feeder, the feeding lever of the knit leader and the row counter. And this tripper on the left is for operating feeding on the knit leader. So it would do a double tap on the knit leader. That is something I didn't realize, but that does make sense as to why when you use a bulky machine, the knit leader trips twice, because we're going twice the length, but I'm going to confuse you if I keep going. Okay, let's talk yarn feeder. Inside this yarn feeder is a plating yarn feeder, a main yarn feeder, and feeder B. So let's take this off. And you can see that there is a separation. I don't know if you can see that from here. There's a little separation inside this sinker plate where a plating yarn would go, and then you have one inside where it's the circle. So if you were plating, you would have a secondary yarn go on this side of this plate and one go in this hole. And what happens is it magically keeps those yarns separated as you're knitting, and it will do a double layer, I guess. is the way to describe it. And it looks really, really cool and makes for nice warm garments for winter. And yeah, we will play with that. No worries. What else do we need to discuss? Okay, we did the roll counter. We have our tools. We have claw weights, table clamps, yarn wax. You will notice that I don't have yarn wax because I use the motor mount. I have moved my wheels here. Okay, so we have these two wheels. They're called left and right. They are for tuck and weaving. When you get to the tuck, it'll tell you where to put them. When you get to the weaving, it'll tell you where to put them. No worries there. I need to find my Series P punch cards. And I need to find some punch card snaps. I'm probably going to use the cast-on comb the most. And I'm not really big on ravel cord, but for you guys, I will do ravel cord. What else do we need to say? Well, we've kind of went through the cam button. Change knob. So N is for normal knitting. KC is for knitting in. SM is for single motif. CR is for carriage remove. Please, for the love of God, do not try and knit in CR. You will not have happiness. In fact, your carriage will skip over needles and, yeah, probably fall off. The next thing I need to do is to actually find some sport weight yarn so that we can start actually threading up this machine and getting going. Guess we'll start with some Stockenet and then move to working with the cast-on comb. Now this one says that the cast-on comb has the hooks away from you. I usually do it with the hooks towards me. But you know what? We'll do it both ways, and whatever works, works. Ensure the cake carriage clears the knitting before you make the return, but not too far away. If you go too far away, that's when you get the looping. You have a plain side and a purl side. And then it starts into pattern knitting. Okay guys, so I'm going to spend the next 5 minutes off camera finding my sport weight yarn that you can actually see while I'm knitting. Okay, I found some colorful yarn. We're going to start with putting it into the knot minder, and then into the second knot minder in between the discs. This would be where your yarn wax thingy is, into the mouth parts of the grasshopper, onto the antenna, and now you are ready to get knitting. I hope that was fairly clear. Okay, so now we are going to load into our machine. We open up the door and we let the yarn into feeder A. We then take our yarn tail, go underneath, find a clip, clip it, and then you can do 2 wraps around your clamp. Not a big deal, really goes quick. Let's start with a small sample. So let's bring out 10 left, 10 right. Gonna bring them all the way out. Gonna open this manual and we're going to follow what the manual says. I don't care what my intuition says to do. We're gonna follow the manual. So let's find it again. Okay, for stockenet stitch, it says, set the cake carriage as shown in the diagram. Done. Bring forward the needles to B position with the flat side of the needle pusher. Okay, so let's pretend. Flat side of the needle pusher. Done like dinner. Take the carriage across the needle bed a few times to align the needles, finishing with the carriage on the right. Yep, carriage is on the right. Push the yarn feeder lever to the left and put in our yarn. Make sure you're going through that little circle. Okay? Close the yarn feeder. Also important, close your yarn feeder. Hold the yarn in securely. That is why we clip it and wrap it around the bottom of the clamp. Move the carriage slowly to the left. Once the needles catch the yarn, you may release the held yarn end. Well, yeah, it's pretty much good. So let's go across. All right, so that's a pretty lazy way of going about it. Now it says, flip it over. Adjust the end needle to B position. Yeah, already done. Take the cast on comb and put the blah blah blah. Hang cast on comb onto each needle. Okay, let's go find a cast on comb. Okay, so it says to take the cast on comb and to try and grab that wasn't very good. Try again. As you can see, it's impossible for me to grab those needles. So we're not doing this one because I cannot get the yarn to stay there. No way. Okay. Alternate way. Into the feeder. Just like before. She goes into the circle. Trying to think here. I'm gonna wrap it. I'm gonna bring these forward, but we're gonna move every second one back. Back, and that one forward. Okay. Now, I'm still hanging on to the end here. We're gonna go over every second one. Grabbing my cast on comb. Now you can see that we can actually access those little ones. So now we actually have a really good grip on those stitches. Okay. Now we can bring the other ones back forward. In fact, we could bring them all the way forward. Knit across. And they all knit. I would do this with waste yarn and then start with my main yarn after I do an E-wrap. To me, it is a lot easier if you have a larger gap. And you will see in a lot of the YouTube videos that they do the 1-by-1 method. instead of doing the all-by-one method. Alright, alternate ways to cast on. I think everyone's heard about the E-wrap. So let's E-wrap. Really easy. Put the yarn between the beds. Hold it. Put it under the needles, around, in the letter E for E-wrap. Seems pretty easy, right? Now, if I try and knit across over these done this way, I'm going to have a failure. The way to prevent that failure is you bring out your wonderful little needles here, brushes, and we very carefully put the brush onto our sinker plate where the W is. Here right away. Okay, so we're weaving. Done and done. I don't have to hold anything. I'm now going to knit across one row. And I have everything is connected. I can now take this cast on comb, attach it to my work, take a couple claw weights, and I can put them on the cast on comb. 1 and 2. I forgot to free that. Okay. We're just going to lift this up a little bit, grab that again. Okay, so now I can knit 2 more rows. 1, 2, and you can see that they are all knitting off properly and are secured. Another cast on is called the double E-wrap. Very similar to the E-wrap, but what you do is you E-wrap around the first one. Make sure your latches are all open. Come around the second one, and then you pull it through, and you repeat. I do a double E-wrap 99% of the time. I find it a lot more secure than the E-wrap, and I get a lot less warping, and I am in control of the tension on that first loop. Also with the double E-wrap is that you will see that we have perfect little holes here. That is where my cast on comb will go. When I get to the last one, I just E-wrap it and pull it through. Make sure I have tension on my antenna. Okay, so you see those little holes? Going a little bit past. Cast on comb into the holes. Oh, hang on. Forgot that part. Okay, now cast on comb into the holes. Everything is captured. Put on my claw weights. And now I just knit across. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can see that, yet again, I have pretty good knitting. I like it. There is another type of cast on which is popular with the Singer brand machines. It is called a weaved cast on. You bring every second needle forward, lay the yarn on top of the needles, put on your weaving brushes, and you knit across. You might want to hang on to it. And you can see it makes a very neat edge. Yet again, it's another edge that you can put your cast on comb into very easily. Capture everything. Put on your claw weights. And knit across. Again, these are all cast-ons that I would do with waste yarn. And then I would do a proper cast-on with my main yarn. The other easiest cast-on is the latch tool cast-on, and we will do that next. Alright, let's latch tool. Bring your needles out, make a little loop, and pull it through. Now, if you attempted to go like that, don't. Loop on and down. Into feeder A. Push these all down. You will see how tight this yarn is. This machine is going to struggle. It doesn't like this kind of cast on. But once you are cast on, you're cast on. Okay, so just like the double E wrap, we have a good surface with which to grab our cast on comb and place it on the machine. Claw weights. And grab. That little issue was just because my yarn got caught on a part of my lid. Okay, so that's basically it. If this was a standard brother, I would just cast right onto the cast on comb, but it isn't, so we're not going to go there. And that's it for lesson number 1. We're going to stop right there, and I'll pick this up in another video, and we'll start knitting more fun things. Before we get into punch cards, we should practice some cast-offs.